Welcome back to Behind Greatness by Inspire. We are back again with one of our favorite people this year, Joe McMoneagle. Joe, welcome back to the program.
Oh, glad to be here.
Sir, if you bear with me for 20 seconds, I want to, for the new listeners, I want to make sure that they understand that we have been around for 13 years. We're as a podcast around four. We're a non-for-profit, also a charity. You can go to our website. You can find anything you want regarding our podcast, including if you're so inclined to donate. Like I said, we all give our time. We're a charity and a not-for-profit, and any listener can also review, comment, share. Please, that's how we've been growing, and we're happy about it. We're actually never really happy because this doesn't bring us happiness. But we do this because we're curious. And yeah, we're meeting with people who have been exploring like what we say is the what if and the why not. And Joe is a perfect example of somebody who's done that. So if you have listened, listener, if you have listened to parts 1 and 2, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're a new listener to Joe, what I would suggest is you go to part 1 and part 2 first. But then again, it's just a suggestion. Don't do as I say. Do as you like to do. Joe, again, welcome back, man.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right, all right. So am I. Um, All right. So the in the last conversation, we ended off on the start of kind of a different string of discussion. It
Right,
was the remote viewing through exploring rather than through uh, an operational approach. So I
right,
asked you if you've ever used remote viewing for exploring for the sake
right.
of.
hmm
So we'd started to talk about that.
Yeah. Did I talk about the French caves in France?
No, you did not.
Okay.
Go for it.
They're uh uh Stephen Schwartz is in his own right. He uses remote viewers quite frequently. He's done a lot of work. He's published uh a lot of things about how he uses remote viewing for pursuits in ancient history, that sort of thing, finding burial sites, uh, that that kind of things. And he called me once and he said one of the problems they're having. I don't know if you remember. There's a cave somewhere in France. I can't remember where exactly, but it's a cave where they have lots of the handprints on the walls and the paintings of the bison and that sort of thing, the woolly mammoths and whatnot. And it's a very famous cave. A lot of uh, sapien type artwork on the walls. And the problem is there's been so many people in and out of that cave, particularly people who just want to look at the art that primitive man put up, that there's now stuff growing on the walls and destroying the art itself. So he came to me and asked if I thought I'd be able to find any additional caves that had the same kinds of uh, prints and whatnot on the ceilings and the walls. And I said I had no idea, but I gave it a shot, and we did. We ended up finding one, or I think it was one for sure, or possibly two additional caves of like ilk. They looked just similar to the one that was they were losing. So as a result, they're reserving those for primarily for research. So, of course, people that go into those caves in order to preserve the artwork and the study capability, they're going to People have to go in with rebreathers and moon suits and that sort of stuff,
Wow.
rather than just go in and change the air quality, raise the humidity and all that kind of stuff. But
Did you find those caves while you were there on site, or did you do it remotely?
oh no, I did it remotely from Virginia, Central Virginia, from my home on a mountain. I,
Of course you did.
I had a I had another thing came up. It was kind of now it's funny now. I look back on this one, it was funny the outcome because it was like a comedy of errors. Um it was a men's I think it was aftershave company came to me and said, we'd like to do an aftershave commercial for this champagne man shaving aftershave cologne, and we want to find a new discovery no one's ever seen, and actually film the commercial while we're discovering this. And do you think you could find something down in South America? And I said, yeah, sure. So I gave them an area to target with cameras, and they hired a helicopter and went out with a preliminary uh, team and photographed the area, and then sent me the photographs. And I sent one back. I said, it's obvious that this is some kind of a structure because, they had all these trees, this jungle like mass on the side of a mountain. But there was one section where it was a perfectly smooth height for all the trees. And I said, that obviously is some kind of a structure because these are like all the same kind of tree growing and like a perfect angle going up the side of the mountain. So they did a second team and discovered that it was some kind of a pyramidal form or something. And so they wanted to film the commercial and everything by discovering it, on the air, that kind of thing. And men's aftershave, that sort of thing. So they went down there with a whole huge film crew. The problem was they hired a couple helicopters, and they had someone on site who was translating the English of my remote viewing into Spanish or whatever the language, the dialect for that area, so
Mhm.
that everybody would be on the same sheet of music. And in the translation into whatever dialect it was, um, they had asked me a question in the remote viewing. They had asked me, um, if you were to meet someone on the trail, what would be the right thing to ask in order for them to direct you to this? And I said, you would want to, well, if you met somebody on the path, you would want to ask them to give you the way, to light the way to the discovery. That would be sort of a poetic way of saying it to them in whatever
Mhm.
dialect it was. And so that got translated. And so the day they were outfitting the helicopters, they took the doors off the helicopters and mounted these mounts for the cameras in the doors they take the vibration out of the camera. They make a nice smooth flowing film. But they look an awful lot like machine gun mounts.
Oh my
And
God.
the local paramilitary showed up and saw these helicopters with the doors off and the submarine mounts on the side of them. And they came over and said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And they said, "We're a film company." And it was I think it was one of these. Oh yeah, okay. Uh, what are those papers? Let's see those papers. So they gave them the papers. Now you got to remember, back then there was a terrorist organization at the time. At least that's what they were called,
Yeah.
and their name was the Shining Path.
Oh
Boy,
boy.
translated into that dialect.
Oh boy. You got to ask them
Now
about the shining path.
ask somebody in the lit path, the shining path, for direction.
Oh wow.
So the helicopters were confiscated, all their equipment, and they got jailed. And
Because of you.
the last I heard, I was not going to get paid.
Oh,
It
that's
was like
solid.
crazy, just crazy befuddlement. And but it turned out it was a real discovery. It was like a pyramidal shaped thing in the
So
jungle with trees growing all over it.
so I didn't quite get it at the beginning. You found this. So they asked you to find something, and you
Yeah,
found something, and you told them to go to this location.
yeah. What I did is I got a map for the area they wanted me to look, and it's a big area, and I doused it. Um, I
You
took
doused it. Okay.
yeah, I did down. They use dowsing to find places to drill wells and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. We
And
learned that with Russell Targ. Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
yeah, I was actually taught by a woman by the name of Frances Farelli. She was a very famous dowser, and she was brought to Stanford Research Institute International when I was there, and we did sort of a technology exchange. I kind of told her what I was doing with remote viewing, and she told me some things about how to dowse. And she taught me this really cool thing with a ruler, where you take a map and you can turn it upside down so you can't see the map. You just have the white back portion of the map. And you move this ruler down the map with just the slightest bit of pressure on it. And you don't look where the ruler is. You just think in your head what you're looking for. And when the ruler sticks and stops moving, you draw a line. Then you turn it 45 degrees and you do the same thing and you draw another line. If you draw 3 lines, if you're if you're really good with the dowsing, it comes out with a very small triangle somewhere in there. And it can be anywhere on that map because the ruler's, pretty big. And that's dowsing with a ruler. And then you can also dowse with a pendulum and a number of other different ways without having to be there. And so that's what I did. And I said that's the area. You want to photograph that area and send me the photographs, and I will look at the photographs and tell you what I see. And so they sent me the photographs, and I said, I told you about the straight line going down the side of the hill. I said,
And
that
what
looks
was
to
it?
me like it's not natural. So
And what was so in the end it was uncovered, right? Like they know what it is.
I don't know if they know what it is. I'm not sure if they went in there and discovered it, but somebody went in there. maybe the paramilitary thought they were going to make contact with the shining path there or something, and they went in in force. I don't know. I just know that the whole thing was blown by the translation of the actual statements that were made.
Just to go to the story prior, Stefan Schwartz, he was also on the program here about a year and a half ago, and we had a 2-part series with him because, like you, he almost had like too many stories, and so he
Yeah,
shared
yeah.
some of the big ones.
He's been
And
working a long time using remote viewers.
yeah,
Absolutely.
before
And
SRI, he was doing it since the late '60s.
yeah, well, I don't know exactly when he started, and I'm not sure he called it remote viewing then, because
No,
remote viewing really came out of SRI when they started doing serious study, and they had this psychic Ingo Swann came in there from New York, and he had something to do with coming up with the name. So it was probably called something else. It really, it doesn't matter. It's immaterial because what we're calling remote viewing goes all the way back to ancient Grecian times. There's records of remote viewing, and you can go even further back than that. So it's not like it was invented in the early 1970s. It's been around for 1,000 years. And so it doesn't surprise me that Stefan was using that methodology for quite a while.
he mentioned I forget his name. I'll have to go back to the episode. That one of the strongest remote viewers he's worked with was a a Canadian guy out of British Columbia who worked as a service manager at a GM dealership, and he brought him out to Egypt to help him discover
Uh-huh.
some like some
Yeah.
important sites.
Yeah.
Did you ever meet that individual? Do you recall
No, no,
this individual?
no, I did. The only individuals I ever met that he had used were people that were also used at SRI, Stanford Research Institute. Um, there were some people there that I got to participate with, but no, no, it was rare. But every once in a while, he would call me on the phone and ask me if I would help him with something, and I would.
So let's go back to SRI because you never gave us the background on how you got started there. But I think also more importantly, you said that when you started SRI, so Stanford Research Institute with Russell Targ, Hal Puthoff,
Right.
um, you were the first operational spy working with them.
Yeah,
Um,
I was well, I don't know if I'm the first operational spy, but I was the first guy out of the military unit, Stargate. In fact, for almost 3 decades, I was the only one that went from the military side to Stanford Research Institute, and I did that because I retired from the military in 1984, and I started my own company, which was called at the time, and it still exists. It's Intuitive Intelligence Applications. It's incorporated in the state of Virginia now, 39 years, 38 years, something like that. I don't even know now. But after I started that company, I was doing work with different corporations and things, and different people and detectives, and anybody that needed help, I was helping them. And so I wrote a letter to SRI and said I really wanted to be involved in the science side, because that's where all the action was in my mind. That's where you found out things first about remote viewing, the strengths of it, the weaknesses of it, that sort of thing. And I really wanted to develop that background, the research background. So I wrote a letter and I got an answer from Dr. Hal Puthoff. And I flew out there and met with him. We had lunch together one day. This was in 1985. And I asked him if he had room for another psychic. And he said there might be two problems. One problem is Ingo. Ingo Swann was the top psychic at the time at Stanford. Um, at the same time, I happen to be considered to be one of the best, if not the best, psychic in the military unit. So he thought we'd clash, and I didn't. I told him I didn't think so. I think we might get both of us might get better if we were able to sit and talk and exchange ideas about remote viewing. But he was very nervous about it. So he said, "Well, we'll give it a shot and see what happens." He said, "I can't promise anything." And I got along fine with Ingo. He trained me in his methodology, which I never used. Um, he trained. In fact, he trained everybody that was doing remote viewing at SRI. He trained everybody with his methodology, and nobody ever used it. He never used it. So you know that kind of thing. He
what methodology did you use?
My own. It was one I developed over 7 years. It was serving me fine, and all it was if I had a problem, I figured out a way around it. It was just practice mostly. Um, if I started having a problem with some area, I'd just pound away at it until I broke through.
I heard you say in another interview that you failed the first 24 times
That's right.
when you
Yeah.
started with them.
that's when I came back from SRI. I was tested at SRI, but actually I wasn't tested. I was asking a lot of questions about it. So they said, well, the way you would find out more is to do one or two.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wound up doing 6, and I had 5 first place matches, which was the best you could do, and 1 very close. So that's a record. It's never been beat since. No one's ever done
Wow.
that. So, everybody knew I was good at remote viewing, and I just kept getting better. I think one of the reasons why is everybody thinks that in order to learn remote viewing, the conditions have to be ideal. Everybody thinks you don't want to have any kind of distractions when you're doing remote viewing. So they take everything out of the remote viewing room. Distractions could be differences in color. So they paint everything the same color. Um, too much sun, too dark, too much light, and that sort of thing gets in the way. Birds chirping in the window, people talking through the walls. They started coming up with all these different things, and they were going to extreme extent to eradicate them. To make it ideal. And in my mind, that was crazy because I was in the U.S. Army, and where do you have a perfect circumstance for anything in the Army? Nowhere, you know. So I came up with this idea that if you know how you daydream when you sit at your desk and you
Often.
got a pile of work and you've been working all morning, and somebody comes in and says, "Hello, hello," and you suddenly are focused back in the room.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of sitting there daydreaming with your eyes open, but you're not in the room.
Yeah.
That's the condition I wanted to achieve, being able to daydream deliberately in the middle of a crowded room with a whole lot of stuff going on. I figured if I could disassociate from the room, then I would be able to control everything else. And it turns out that's true. And so that was kind of my methodology. And I started out by uh, doing this meditation. It is very similar to what they call zazen meditation, which is meditation on nothing. In other words, if you know you're thinking about something, you just ruin the situation. So
Hmm.
I started doing that. I started disassociating from the room I was in by staring at something. And what happened is over time, I got really good at it. And it turns out that in most cases where it would seem impossible to remote view is when I'm best. Like a crowded studio with a big audience, or 20 million viewers or something. Like I'm still capable of doing the remote viewing without anything bothering me. And a lot of people wonder how that's possible. Anyway, he was concerned that Ingo and I wouldn't get along. It turned out we got along fine. And in fact, we would eat dinner together quite frequently, and we shared uh, the same motel. My room was always next to his at the Mermaid Inn, it was called, which was right across the street from SRI.
Mm-hmm.
So we spent a lot of time floating in the pool and just hanging out, talking. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember one night we were eating dinner, and he said, "I finally figured you out." We're both eating steak, okay, and I thought it was pretty brave of him to say it with me holding a steak knife, but he said he said, "Joe, you are one iconoclastic SOB."
Ah,
And I said, "Geez, Ingo, thank you, man. I think I'm going to take that as a compliment." And I reached across the table and shook his hand, and we continued eating and talking. And then when we got back to the motel, his room was next to mine, but we were both putting our keys in the door at the same time. And we turned our keys at the same time, and he stepped into his room, and I was halfway into mine, and I stopped, backed out, locked my door, and ran down to the office. And I said, do you have like a dictionary or a thesaurus? Because I didn't know what iconoclastic meant.
Oh, you faked it all the way to the hotel, eh?
Yeah. So
you didn't want to offend your floating buddy.
Right. So I found out that I still think he meant it as a compliment. Ingo didn't have boundaries when it came to some things, and he was one of the most honest people I ever met. I really liked him a lot. I really did, because he was brilliant, and he was a fine artist, an incredible artist. And I liked his art a lot. So, we got along great. And I did some of my best viewing there for the science side, which made me feel good. And I learned a lot about research. I was there until it closed at SRI, and that was in about 1988. And when they closed the lab at SRI, they moved it to SAIC, Science Applications International Corporation. And so I was let go at SRI and hired by SAIC. So I went to SAIC with Ed May, Dr. May.
Yep.
And Ingo actually left SRI around mid 1986, I think, because he was teaching the new people in the Army, and he got into it with military contractors. I don't know what happened, but he quit and went back to New York. And I went to SAIC and here in Virginia, in fact. And I worked there until the Project Stargate closed in 1995, I think it was. So I was with the Stargate labs the whole time they existed, from when I retired from the Stargate program for the Army. And so they had me for two reasons: study, and also I kept doing collections. So
can you give us an example of both? Like, let's start with collections. What kind of I guess intelligence is what you mean by collections, right?
Yeah, I can't say much about that, except that they would task me and send the reports forward to the military. So the problem was the Stargate program that the military had no viewers. We started out with 6. It was 5 men and a woman. That was I was recruited in October of 78. And the rest were recruited after me. So we wound up with 5 men and 1 woman. And the woman was gone within a year because of our boss, mostly. He was slightly misogynistic. And the five men basically many of them were combat experienced, so they were dying from Agent Orange and other complications because the stress in the program was so high. And just to give you an idea of the stress, one of my friends in the original 5 was a man who was 29 years old, married maybe 6 months, had a child on the way, picture of good health, massive coronary in my office. I gave him CPR for 45 minutes, didn't do any good. Blood gases were great. His heart muscle was torn to pieces.
Wow, 29.
Coronary was just really significant. And then my best friend of all, who was probably a better remote viewer than me, was a guy named Hartley Trent. He was a naval photo interpreter, and he died from cancer. So I and one other man were the last ones left, and that guy left after 3 years. He said that was enough. He left. I think the pressure was just too much. So he went back to another assignment, and so that left me. The last 2 years I was there, 83 and 80. Well, middle of 82 to September 1st of 84, I was the only viewer.
Why? So why did you last and not the others?
I'm an obstinate, iconoclastic
Yeah,
SOB.
iconoclastic. Yeah. Stupid question. Stupid question. Well,
Anyway,
you did. So this is what you told me before the record this afternoon.
yeah.
Because you worked in reconnaissance for most of your military career before this,
yeah.
and you said it's always. I mean, I should, to be fair, I should give context, but this is what you said. You said it's a bad idea to listen to the voice in your head.
Yes. Yeah, and the reason why is because if you when you're in the enemy's area of operation and not in your own, that's where you do recon usually, whether it's photographic recon, intelligence recon, radio recon, whatever it might be. Well, no matter what, if you're in the enemy's area of operation, you don't want to be known to be in there. So you do everything you can to not be known to be in there, which means you pick every little fragment of trash up that you might have. You don't even leave your matches on the ground if you lit a cigarette or something. In fact, you don't smoke because the smoke will give you away as well as the brand. So, and we in fact, my team, we always ate the Vietnamese food because you belch and you fart and you can tell the difference in the kind of food somebody's eating. And
Wow, never thought of that.
underneath in the brush, down in the areas where the pockets of air haven't moved in 1,000 years, it'll hang there for 3 days. And somebody can come through there and go, just sniff. Oh, there's an American around here somewhere,
There's American farts
Yeah.
hanging.
Now it takes a
Shouldn't
pretty
laugh, but
smart
yeah,
guy to do that, but you don't want
sure.
one smart guy knowing you're there, because then they turn
Mhm.
dogs loose. And when they turn the dogs loose, dogs never fail. They will track you. And the problem is then you have to get to either an evacuation point in a big hurry. And it's like you you would never assume that they don't know what all the good evacuation points are in their AO. Okay. So you have to stay ahead of them. And if you're carrying you're carrying a considerable amount of equipment if you're out there for 10 days or a week. And so it's hard, and they'll run you down because they're putting people out in front of you, they're putting people out on the side of you. They have a general idea where you are. So the whole idea is to not be known that you're there anyway. So it's a misconception a lot of people make when you say, I was in some kind of recon unit or exploratory unit or photographic unit or something, and they think that you saw a lot of combat. No, never. Because then they know where you are, and you don't survive that because the team's only 3 or 5 guys, and you're toast. So and so every once in a while you might pick up on a noise or a feeling. Usually it's a sound that doesn't fit in the area you're in. It just doesn't fit. And so you go to ground. You just bail off the trail and get into the brushes and the weeds and camouflage yourself. I mean, you're already pretty camouflaged, but you don't want to move. You can't move. That's a no because you see movement. That's what tells you somebody's there. The problem is that the guys that are looking for you are the guys that are your enemy. Put that in quotes. The guys who
Yeah.
you don't want seeing you as they're moving down the trail. They're as instinctive as you are.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll suddenly stop sometimes because something triggered them. You don't know what it is. It could be a smell or a sound. It could be anything. And so they'll stop and they'll start looking around. And every now and then they'll look right at somebody. So, and that distance might be, 5 feet, 10 feet. I mean, so close, you can't blink. You can't, you can't take a deep breath. You can't do anything except freeze. Now, when that happens, there's a little voice in your head that's screaming at you. I mean, it is like screaming at you. It's so loud, you think they can hear it. And
Wow.
it's saying, run in great big capital letters. Of
Yeah,
course, if
yeah,
you
sure.
did, you'd be toast. So you have to like not succumb to it. It may say duck or shoot or something, but it's like it probably ties directly to the fight or flight, issue. But it's like you haven't lived till you've gone through that. It doesn't happen very often, but man, I still have dreams of that,
But so what's the just to stay on that for a second, what was the closest call you've had other than the one where you taped yourself to a tree that you
Yeah,
described in the last
yeah,
episode?
that's a
That's a
prime
good one. That's
example.
a good one.
We were the area we were in. What wasn't heavily occupied, at least to our knowledge. They told us that it wasn't. We scouted the area like for 4 days before. We had a guy go up in a forward air control plane and check it out, and didn't draw any fire and didn't see any cooking fire. None of that stuff. And they weren't known to be in that area, and so
Yeah.
it would have been an easy walkthrough, and and so we got a little lost. So it was kind of a lightly jungle area. I wouldn't even call it
Mm,
jungle. I'd call it more like where I live now, forest. And
sure.
so I said, "Oh, here's a really good climbing tree. I'll go up and see if I can get a view from up top." So I told the other two guys, I said, you know, dig in and wait. And so they did. They dropped off the trail. They were in the bush. And I went up the tree and I got about halfway up that tree and I started smelling rice cooking. And so I started looking down into the darkness under the trees, the shadowed areas. And there's a fire, and there's a fire, and there's a fire. It looked like a whole platoon down there cooking the rice. I said, "Oh my God. If these guys just looked up, they'd shoot me out of the tree."
Toast.
And,
Toast.
and so I didn't know what to do. I just stayed up in the tree. Basically, I stayed up there all night. And I actually had to um, peel off a big chunk of duct tape very quietly and slowly to wrap around me in the tree because I thought I'd fall out of the tree. If anything happened, I'd fall out of the tree. But the next morning, everybody was gone. And I came down the tree, and the guys were really ticked. Because all those guys down there moved right past them. I mean, just went like right over them when they left. Could have walked right into them. They didn't. You know,
So they didn't have is it because they didn't have a choice because they were going to be seen, or because they're also waiting for you to come down? They didn't want to desert their buddy
I don't.
by leaving.
They would never. I don't. My guys, they never would have left me there
Yeah.
hanging in a tree.
I figured. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I need to ask. Who knows?
Yeah, and
Uh,
one of the things that happens, you turn everything off. You turn your radio off. At any of your equipment that has this battery operated, you got to turn it all off because you don't want it popping on. You know, with the latest 60s rock music or something. No, we don't listen to rock music. That I shouldn't have said that, but you don't want
why?
somebody.
It's good music.
Yeah, I know, but not in the middle of the war.
Yeah, of course.
um, no, you turn if you got an RTO with your radio operator or something, then you ask him to turn his radio off, or he knows to turn it off.
You said dogs will always sniff you out, which I took a note here. It reminded me of the conversation we had with somebody else who worked in, I think it was 84, 85. Lynn Buchanan. You
Uh huh.
probably know Lynn Buchanan. And he said that adversaries adversaries would also have dogs in the room with them if they suspect that they were being remote viewed. So he says he explained where there was one time where he bilocated instead of remote viewing. He actually bilocated, and there was a dog there that noticed his presence.
I think that's a mythology. I think that people would like to think that that would happen, and it doesn't.
Okay.
Um, there was one case where they thought that uh, something I was remote viewing, that Ingo was remote viewing. We both were in the same place at the same time. We saw each other, and the way it went was it was a training target, and the target was uh, I think it was the stone chapel in the middle of Arlington Cemetery in Washington, and it was the target date and time was midnight, the night that President John F. Kennedy's body was held in state inside that chapel. He was in that chapel that night, and there were guards on the exterior doors, and there was nobody in the chapel. It was sealed for the ceremony the following day. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what it was, but could have been somebody else. But I think it was JFK. And when I got it was a training target, and when I got it, I drew the inside of the chapel. You know, it was an okay drawing. You couldn't be able to tell it was a chapel by the drawing. I actually said chapel, uh, but it had these pew like benches, and I said over on the right, extreme right, was a man, and I sketched a man sitting on the right with a white hat on, and the hat was down low enough you couldn't see his face, and they thought that was kind of cool, but sorry to tell you, Joe, there's no guy in that room because nobody was in there except the body. Okay. So I was thinking, wow, that's too bad. But I got the rest of it right. So they logged it in and took it to the safe, put it in the file. And when they put it in the file, they noticed there was one other practice session that had been done on the same target. And that was done by Ingo. And Ingo had done the same thing. He had said it was a chapel. And his drawing was, of course, much better than mine. And he had drawn a man in the front left pew with a black hat on. And so they surmised that he was seeing me in the chapel and I was seeing him in the chapel because it was the same date time. Now, I don't believe that. I think that we put somebody in the chapel because, in a sense, there was somebody in the chapel. Neither one of us saw the body. And I think that's what generated the male figure in both cases. But that's my belief. Um, I have, outside of that, I have never seen anything that even could be surmised as knowledge that a remote viewing was taking place. It just doesn't happen. That's one of the, aside from the fact it doesn't work all the time, and you can't tell when it does and when it doesn't, other than by the result. That's bad enough. You can't tell when it works or doesn't work. But the biggest problem is you can't tell when it's been used either. No one
Right.
can tell. And
So including you, who has been
yeah,
remote viewing for so many
exactly.
decades,
You,
right?
you
You
can't
can't tell.
target something and know that another remote viewer is targeting it. Now, having said that, I did an experiment with the best Russian psychic in their program after
Okay.
the wall came down in Russia.
Hmm.
And we did something together that was terribly spooky. I'll say it
Do
that way.
tell. Do tell.
She is a female. She is about 28 years old. And when I first met her, she hid behind a security guy. She didn't want to be near me. Um, but she was their best psychic. And the way they picked their psychics is they went straight to combat soldiers and found their psychics there because they were survivors. She was
Hmm.
a tank commander in Chechnya during the war in Chechnya. And my understanding was, they paint tanks on the side of their tank when they take a tank out. She had like 8 tanks painted on the side of her tank, so
Hmm.
she was some kind of badass with the tank. She was also very pretty, and they said she was their best psychic, and so they had us do a experiment together. And what it was, they had 2 deprivation chambers that were in the ground, maybe 60 feet. And you went down a ramp to get in, and the walls, it was like a cube made of concrete. The walls were maybe 16, 17 feet thick. And when you were inside, they had like a chair that would look like a throne, and you sat in the chair, and they put a digipad, they folded a digipad over your lap and gave you an electric pen. And then they shut this big vault door and then turned everything off, lights, air, everything. There was not a single sound or speck of light in the room. So in 10 minutes, you feel like you're floating upside down near the ceiling. Yeah, I mean, total deprivation.
So this
The
is you and
job
her
was,
in that same space.
yes, we're both in the same state, only we're a quarter mile apart from each other.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay. Our task was it was a 2-part task. The first part was figure out who the sender would be of a message and who the receiver would be. In other words, understand that as an agreement psychically. And once that was determined, the sender would pass a message to the receiver. Now, I was sitting in there for 30 minutes. We had 30 minutes before we had to make that determination. So it was like a prep time when you're in this deprivation kind of situation. So I was sitting there trying to figure out who the sender would be and who the receiver would be. And it was ridiculous. I mean, no, you can't figure that out. So I decided what I would do is just put the pin in the middle of the digit board. So by feel, I guessed about where the center was, and I put my pin there. And when there's a little bell, and they go ding. And when it dings, you start the experiment. When it dings again, you stop. And so when they hit the bell, I just let my hand go where I felt it needed to go. So I was trying to keep my mind off of it, just letting it wander. And I did that for maybe 10 minutes. And then the second bell went off and the lights came on and the air ventilation and everything, and they opened the door, and I walked out, met her halfway to the control room. We went up to the control room where they had two computers sitting there, and both both of the drawings or whatever it was that we did on the digiboards went straight to the computer. So they had to do was turn the screens on, and they would appear. When we turned the screens on, I almost fell down because it was like you could take one drawing and do this to it, just split
Oh,
it
wow.
like a butterfly. Now
Reflection
there
of
were
it. Yeah.
differences, but they were really small. You could see them, maybe one here and one there and one here, that sort of thing. But overall, it looked identical, the two drawings. And I looked at Ed, and he looked at me, and I looked at the admiral who runs their program, and I said, "Can we have a copy of both sides?" And he said, "Yeah." They wouldn't give us it. They wouldn't give it to us, and I'm still wondering why not. It could have been hoaxed, you know. I don't know. It's impossible to know without understanding how the whole system's wired, put together, everything. I just don't know the answer to that. But the next day, she showed up in an OD green dress with a belt on that said U.S. Army, U.S. Army, U.S. Army, all the way around the belt. And she hung all over me. Now, that may not sound unusual. She's a pretty girl. I'm a guy, but she's gay. She has her girlfriend with her, and she hung all over me the next day. I don't know what that's about, but maybe I'm being schmoozed or something, but it was bizarre. You understand what I'm saying?
Like maybe she felt a real connection
Yeah,
seeing somebody
I
who
think
had the
she
same
did.
sort of skill.
Yeah, I think she did. It was almost like maybe a brother sister kind of thing or something. I
Yeah,
don't know,
yeah, yeah.
but she couldn't speak a word of English, but she hung all over me. Was very friendly the next day, and I
Well,
thought that was interesting.
so when you just to go back to understand a little bit better, when you said who's the sender and who's the receiver,
Right.
what did you have to get? Who did you have to guess as being the sender and the
Well,
receiver?
that's what we had to settle that psychically. In other words, one of us had to be the sender, one of us had to be the receiver,
Oh,
and
of
that
each
didn't make
other.
any
Okay.
sense to me. That didn't make any sense
Yeah.
at all to me. What I kept saying over and over in my head, well, why can't we both be the same? Do the same thing. That comes to the same thing, right? If you're going to send "How are you" in a message, if both of you
Mm.
think the message is "How are you," who's the sender and who's the receiver? It doesn't make any sense,
There's no sender and no receiver. In
right?
that case, if you've done
Or
exactly the
there
same,
is,
there's no sense.
and you can't point them out because they both say the same thing. I just never fully understand why they had us do that. But I can tell you, they treated me uh, with huge respect when I was there. I went back two more times, and
To do that same exercise.
no, not the same exercise. No, I mean went back to Russia two
To
more
meet up
times.
with her. To meet up with her.
No, she wasn't there the next two times. Um, the
I was
first time
kidding. You know, it was a bad joke.
we didn't see. Yeah, we didn't see the actual unit the first time. They kind of schmoozed us a little bit. It's like, did you see everything? When all they showed us was some offices and a lab. And
Sure.
and I asked the admiral. I said, Why is it that all the plugs off all the equipment in the lab don't fit any of the outlets?"
Hmm.
And then what he
Was
said,
this
he turned to the security officer and he said, I told you, I told you, this man could draw this whole place from America.
That's
Why does he
great.
need to? Why do we need to be doing this?
Did they know by that time that you were the guy who remote viewed their giant submarine?
Oh yeah, yeah. That
They knew
listen.
that.
I had coffee with. I think he was a Major General Sham. He was the ex deputy director of the KGB. He and I had coffee, and he knew that I did that. And I had to sit down and talk to uh, a five. He would be equivalent to a 5-star in our military, like
Mm-hmm.
chief of staff. And he was wanting me to sign my book where I mentioned the submarine in one of my books. And he wanted me to sign it. And he carried it around in his back pocket so often it was rolled up, in a tight little roll. You almost couldn't stand on the edges so that you could sign it. I mean, it was so badly rolled up. But he carried it for a few years. And he told me when I signed it for him, I said, let me get you a hard copy done in Russian, translated into Russian. It's much better. No, 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 it's got to be this. And I said, why? And he said, because that's what I had. That's the only thing I had. And I thought it was disinformation. You could not have known about the submarine because I didn't know about the submarine.
Wow.
He said,
Wow.
we had the submarine, I can't remember, he said 5 or 6 years. And I didn't know we had it. And you knew it when it was launched. And I said,
Yeah,
well,
that's
how do you know it's true that I actually did what I say I did? And he said, he did this. He looked around like he wanted to make sure nobody was listening. And he leaned way over and he said, our spy in your defense intelligence agency told me it was real. Now,
Jesus.
I sat there a minute. The first thought in my head was, now talk about disinformation.
Yeah, right, right.
I'm
Is he
downloading
pulling
on me
my
right
leg? Is this just...
now. So I did what comes natural. I did a humor thing. I just leaned over and I said, will you tell me what the initials are of that person? And he said, oh, no, I couldn't do that. They'd bury me under the front steps of the FSB. And I said, that's all right, General. I'll just wait you go to sleep tonight. Take it out of your head. And he grabbed his head like this and ran out of the room.
That's
Yeah.
good. That's
Then
good.
his aide came in and grabbed the book off the table and took off with it. So,
Okay, so you know he wasn't pulling your leg if he was really
well,
fearful.
I don't know. I still don't know. And it doesn't
Well,
matter.
but
I
it's
know what I
funny.
did. Yeah. It's funny though. Yeah.
That's it almost actually that's what really matters is that it's funny.
Yeah.
It's like,
And, and I have to say, when we're not in contention with the Russians, they're fun
mm,
people. They're fun.
sure.
And I sat and had a party with probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 generals and a bunch of colonels, equivalent to colonels, and security people and probably SKGB and whatever. And everybody drank sinfully. I mean, to the point of true excess. And the idea was we had great respect for one another because we were all professionals, professional soldiers, sailors, whatnot. It's when you're in contention, it's the only time you have to shoot and kill one another. And it's
Mm,
crazy. And that's when we're ordered to by our different countries' governments. Now, so it's never the military that starts conflict. It's always politicians that start conflict. And they have no skin in the game. They don't have to pay anything for that. It's the military pays for that, and the families of military that pay for that. They get it all backwards. It should be first people on the line when the war starts is the politicians or their
Wars would
children
never start.
or their yeah.
Hmm.
The wars would end. We'd have people sitting at negotiating tables that would grow white beards, sitting there talking. They'd be talking their
Hmm.
heads off forever before they start something. The only problems we'd have would be terrorism, and we could gang up. Then we could come together and say, let's eradicate terrorism wherever it happens. You know, it it just doesn't make sense to me.
How do you progress with your days now, knowing and having experienced for decades this sort of thing that most people haven't? Like you talked about the your out of body experiences through the Monroe Institute and having the defense industry actually pay for that kind of research. This spying, remote viewing, teaching remote viewing, like you know that reality is more holistic than we think it is. How how do you move forward with your day knowing what you know?
Well, here's the primary thing that comes out of that. I've been doing this for 45 years on
Hmm.
top of my military career. My almost 15 straight years overseas on active missions. So the the reality is what it teaches me or what I've learned from it is a very small thing, but it's huge when you look at the impact. The humans on this planet, we're magical beings. We really are, because we're capable of understanding mythology, magic, spiritual things. We have beliefs that transcend the physical, and we're able to integrate that completely with a pragmatic and physical side of our nature. So we have a deeper understanding for the fact that we truly are more than our physical bodies, right? No other animal on this planet that I'm aware of has that capacity. And yet we focus on everything but that. It's like we even in our religions, we segregate ourselves, and we all pray to essentially the same creator, but it's the ideal that we create that we believe is the right one, and we'll kill over it. Now, look at the insanity of that.
Hmm.
Okay. That's not even in the teaching of any of the great prophets. You can go back, uh, Buddha, Christ, Muhammad, any of them. They all say the same thing. It's bastardized. It's corroded. It's rewritten to fit what people want it to fit because of power over others, or because of the need for more of this money or whatever, power, money, position. That's nuts. And yet, with knowing that we're that that kind of animal, we choose to do the worst possible things to one another. It just, when you stop and think about it, that's you you have to be mentally ill to do that. But we're not. We're like, no, we identify as different cultures, different everything. Well, yeah, we all are different. Every human being on this planet is different from any other human being. But we don't accept that. We generalize, you know. No, 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 no. We over here are this kind of human, and you over there are that kind of human.
Hmm.
You know,
We live a life of separation from others.
yeah, it doesn't go anywhere. It's like marking time in one place. The other thing that I've come to to conclude, and it comes from my remote viewing, and some of the things I picked up when I remote viewed Mars and some other things. I'm absolutely convinced, okay? I'm absolutely convinced the only aliens on Earth is us, okay? And the reason I'm saying that is because you can look at any other entity on this planet, like wolves, horses, cows. I don't care what it is, fish, dolphin, no matter what it is. You look at any other entity on this earth, they take exactly what they need to live, and that's it. They don't take any more than that. We as humans keep taking and taking and taking and taking, and we don't even reuse anything. We just in the ocean or something. So we're walking around. We now have aluminum and all kinds of strange, bizarre things in our blood we can't get rid of. More people die from bizarre cancers than ever. It's like wow, and well, we keep taking and taking and taking, and it's our nest that we're doing that to. This is where our home. It's the only one we have. And yet people look around at things flying around and they say, oh, no, those are aliens. Well, I haven't seen an alien yet. What I see is I see drones. When I see what looks like a flying saucer, I call that a drone because to jump from one star to another star, you have to bend and twist time space to do that. And if you
Hmm.
do, a living entity might not make it, but a drone will, perhaps. So you send a drone, and people, well, what about uh, the grays and lizard-like things and this thing and that thing that's people have seen when they're abducted and all that? Those are robots. It's just their kind of robot, not ours. They're probably part mechanical and part grown, like their ships. Their ships are part mechanical and part grown. That I can tell you from what I've read by people, researchers and whatnot, that have supposedly seen, touched, analyzed, or handled any of the materials. It the way they build things is completely different than the way we do. Well, maybe they are the actual original inhabitants of this planet. I don't know. I certainly don't blame them if they want to say shielded or hidden. You know, we're the guys out there detonating
Good point.
stuff, and
We extract and
we're a
destroy
threat.
often.
We're a threat. If we learn tomorrow morning, and it may be that's the next big discovery we're going to make because we're dealing with multiple dimensions and time space questions now. What if our next big discovery, look at this. We were a covered wagon in less than 100 years. We went from a covered wagon society to vaporizing two big cities full of people with two bombs. That was our last really big discovery. What if our next really big discovery is how to make our own drone and jump star to star with it? Would
Mm.
that make us a threat? I'm
It
sorry,
just
but
might,
yeah, yeah,
considering our habits. Yeah.
yeah. If there's
Hmm.
a society out there that's a quarter of a billion years ahead of us, we're toast. It's like, and I think that that's probably happened once or twice in the past. There's evidence that modern bipeds have been on this planet for millions of years. You just don't see it published because it doesn't agree with any of those religions and the science that exists today.
We had we actually recorded a session with Michael Cremo.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
I read Forbidden Archaeology
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago, or whenever it first came out. I can't even remember now. It's been so
Yeah, mid
long.
90s.
It
Yeah.
was like 450 odd pages.
It's a brick.
Today it's
Yeah.
like 800. I mean, every edition there's
Yeah. There's
another
more.
150 pages showing remnants of modern man. I'm not talking about pre-modern man. I'm talking modern man that goes back in some cases 30 million years. I mean, come on. They can't publish it.
Yeah.
That,
Well, yeah, right. So
those
we have to
papers
thank you. We have to thank you for partly for putting us on to him as well in one of our earlier conversations, because we had heard about him but really didn't know, so we started to look into it after you suggested it too.
yeah,
And that was fascinating because yeah, exactly.
yeah,
He found through his research that there was a lot of bona fide archaeological evidence that there were signs of modern human beings existing here millions of years ago, and
yeah,
that was shooed away and put aside 150 years ago.
yeah. God, they bury it. They hide it.
Yeah.
I've been in a natural history museum. I'm not going to say where, but it's well known.
Hmm.
And I was there. I'm a full member of the Parapsychological Association,
Hmm.
and so I go to some of the annual meetings that we have. We have one big meeting once a year, and we always try to have it in a different country each year because we have membership from all over the world, all the countries. And this one place we had it in the Natural History Museum. And I said to the guy when I was in there, he showed us some really cool things. I got, the very ancient statue of a woman that it starts out it looks like a top, thin at the
Okay.
top, thin at the bottom, bulbous in the center. Looks like a really fat example of a woman with no head, no feet.
Hmm.
I held that in my hands. I put on white gloves and I was holding it in my hand. There are three of them that I got to hold, one at a time. I told the guy after everybody else walked away, I said, listen, do you have anything in the museum that you would never put on display because it violates all the rules? And he said, I can't show that to you. And I said, come on, I'm not going to tell anybody. So he took me down where they have these big drawers you pull out. They store stuff in these drawers, and it's floor to ceiling. They got a ladder that rolls along in front, so you can climb the ladder and pull drawers. And he takes me down to this big drawer. It's about 5 feet wide, and he pulls it open, maybe this deep. And in it is a giant bone, biggest freaking bone I ever saw in my life. And I said, where's that from? And he said, that's the front right femur of a Triceratops. The dinosaur with the big
Yeah.
shield
The
in the
horn,
front. In
like
the
an ancient rhino. Yeah.
yeah, with the big prongs coming out. Okay,
Yeah.
that's his front right femur. Okay, with an arrowhead or a spear point embedded in it, and human gnaw marks all over it. Now, I was taught we came 30 million years after the dinosaurs.
Hmm.
And they have recently found if I'm right about this, some kind of lizard remains that are like 1.5 million years old on an island, and the remains are on top of modern human remains and like a chalk bed or something.
Where's
So
the island?
it's I want to say Canary Islands, but that's not right. It's somewhere in that area.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I can't remember right now, but buy the book, read it,
Yeah,
take
it's in
your
Michael
time.
Cremus. Oh, I have it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I do too. I reread it about every other year, like because it just I am reinvigorated by it. You know that there really are people out there, and these are famous scientists. This is like Leakey, who's who discovered. Well, his daughter discovered Lucy in the Aldavi Gorge in Africa.
Yeah.
Oldest example of a human being. You know, he and his daughter drew a picture of Lucy, and I think she's an upright 5'3" modern walking female. There's been 11 drawings done of Lucy before it was ever put into publication of the paper. When they published the paper, Lucy was a knuckle dragging chimpanzee.
Yeah. He told us about her.
Give me a break. You know, that's just blatant lying to the human species. We should know about this stuff.
What is all this, um, including the examples you've just cited now and your experience, everything you've shared with us over the last three records? What does this mean to you? Do you think? Who do you think we are?
Well, first off, we're better than that. There's a huge majority of people who want to say that we aren't. Why? It, I think it's an unspoken, organized attempt at making us knuckle under to a specific hierarchy of individuals who want to rule through whatever fear, religion, whatever. It's a power thing, and it's been going on for millions of years, and I wonder why. I started thinking about that seriously, and I've come to the conclusion that they talk about the war between the angels.
Mm-hmm.
What if we really are aliens and we came from another planet in our own solar system 5 million years ago, and part of us were pragmatic. We went to ground. We knew that we would run out of everything eventually that we could do with our ships. So we decided we'd just start from scratch. And the others stayed with the ships, and maybe some rescuers showed up or something. And they said, let's just leave them alone and see how good they do. I don't know. Maybe it's the good angels and the bad angels. Maybe we are them, you know. So you
That's
got
interesting.
evil incarnate, good incarnate, duking it out. And everybody's in the wings watching to see who wins. I don't know. And I don't care. What I care about is the fact that facts are being buried. And it makes me angry. It's cheating everyone. So we spend all of our time, well, we waste all of our good time
Mm.
doing something other than what we should be doing, which is growing up. That sounds too
What?
arrogant.
Well,
I
I
don't
mean,
mean I don't mean it to be that way.
no, I know you don't. I know you don't because, in a sense, um,
I'm just one in the crowd.
all you're wondering, I'm gonna make my own assumptions here. With all you're wondering, like you've just said, what if? Maybe that's all part of not growing up. In a sense, you grew up in the military. I mean, you've shared
Oh,
enough
you grow
stories
up
now to have
fast
us.
here. In
Yeah,
fact,
you grew up fast that way.
you miss a big chunk of the normal growing up time.
True, but you haven't lost sense of the exploration. Obviously, I mean,
No, yeah,
you've lived a set of experiences that are pretty full on both sides, right? Like on the left and right side, so to speak, like on the
yeah.
pragmatic side and the imagination and the and
I'm
not, I
still
shouldn't say
good for
imagination.
something. You know, like I wrote three letters to NASA volunteering for a one-way trip to Mars. We all know it's going to be a one-way trip.
You're nuts.
No. Listen,
Yeah,
when
yeah, I'm
you
listening. Go.
when you dig that, I mean, if everybody dies, there's no getting around that. So
Sure.
why not doing something worthwhile?
Uh, I, I got no words to say to that. One way
Yeah,
ticket to Mars. But you said earlier, see, I put a note here that you remote viewed Mars.
yeah.
Why and what did you see?
I remote viewed Mars because Department of Defense (DoD) brought the target to me
Hmm.
when I was working with Bob Monroe in his lab at Monroe Institute.
In the
Um,
70s.
no, this was in uh, 1983 time period.
Okay.
It's while I was in Stargate. What they found out is they found out I was having spontaneous out of bodies
Yeah.
as a result of my near death experience in 1970.
And you brought us through this. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And they wanted to know if I could target something in the out of body condition. So I
And
was being trained by him on long weekends. So, while we were doing that, somebody showed up with a list of targets. They were written on a card. They were GPSs, it's 1 through 7, and an envelope with the target identified inside of it. And Bob Monroe was out in the lab area doing some sound work, and I was inside the cube. It's a black isolation chamber, taking
mhm.
a nap because I was exhausted. We had just worked, I think, 10 hours on Friday, same on Saturday, and maybe 8 hours on Sunday. And I was tired, so I was taking a nap. And he woke me up. He said, there's some visitors you might know. I don't know, he said, but they're from the DoD. And they have a card with some target GPS locations on it. And they want you to work it. And I said, okay. And the first target was a huge pyramid. And I said, must be a new discovery. It's a huge, and Bob said, why? And I said, it's a pyramid. It's way bigger than Giza, the biggest pyramid on Earth, as far as I know. No, biggest one's now in South America, but the one at Giza, I said, it's much bigger than Giza. And the rooms are huge inside. So it's a whole different construction methodology. And so I started describing each of the GPS locations. I thought it was a new discovery. I did not know for every planet in our solar system, they have GPS locations. So, a grid, GPS grid.
Mhm.
So, so I started describing them. I did the first 6 and described what was at each location accurately, I would add. And it was unbelievable. I was like, wow, how are they keeping this quiet? You know? And at some point I remember I said to Bob, I said, Bob, the sun looks really weird for some reason. And he says, I'm not interested in the sun. I'm interested in what you're seeing on the ground. And I thought it was on Earth. And I thought, boy, the sun looks pretty weird from Earth today. I couldn't figure it out. Um, and I came to the conclusion they were hibernation chambers because a great catastrophe had happened. They lost their atmosphere, these people, back whenever it was. I felt like it was so far back I couldn't tell what the age was. And so I started picking up on messages. They were kind of like messages left for whoever might find them. And they were talking about, what happened and that sort of thing. And so Bob asked me to describe them. And I said, they're just like us. They're identical. The difference is they're 12 feet tall, 10 feet tall, 11 feet tall. They're huge. But proportionately, they look just like us. We would just come up to their belly button, you know. And so he says something, I can't remember what it was. And I said, look, I'm getting really tired. So I came out and saw the people standing there. And I said, so what's the target? And they said, we don't know. Bob has it. It's in the envelope in his pocket. And he had folded up the envelope and put it in his shirt pocket. So I said, do you have the envelope, Bob? He said, yeah. And he pulled it out and handed it to me. And when I opened it, it said Mars 1 million BC. And that
Wow.
surprised me. So I kept the card. I never described the seventh location because I was so tired, I just couldn't do it. I did the first six. So I kept the card and I told Bob, I said, next time I'm in California visiting SRI, I'm going to go by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL. That's where they're located. And I can ask them for the big negatives, 4x4 negatives for the GPS location. And Bob said, don't ever give them to you. They're probably top secret. I said, nah, you can't classify space photos because our tax money took those photos. So I went by JPL and I was prepped myself and everything. And I walked up to the counter and the guy where they sell all the pictures and negatives and stuff. And I handed him the card and I said, I'd like the 4x4 negatives for all of those locations. And he just looked at the card and said, oh man, that's the ancient city on Mars. He turned around, pulled a drawer open, and handed me a packet.
Stop it. Hand you a
Yeah,
packet.
it had all the negatives in it, it had everything. And they're all in my book.
Order for Mars coming right up.
And he said, if you use this for anything, you just have to like mention the fact that you got them from JPL or NASA or something. I can't remember, but I put it in my book.
Okay, so we have your book, and my apologies, I didn't even tell you. I think it's the right book that we had. The secrets to remote viewing.
No, it's not in that one. It's in Mind Trek, which was the first book I wrote.
And do you still have those negatives? No.
Yeah. You can get
He
them.
just gave them to you?
Yeah, in a packet. I didn't even tell him what I was looking for. I just said, I handed him the list of GPS locations. And I said, I'd like to, this is on Mars, and I'd like to see the 4x4 negatives for these locations. And he just looked at the card and said, oh, this is the ancient city on Mars. And he turned around, pulled open a drawer, and pulled a packet out and handed it to me. I didn't even have to pay for
it. Wow.
I need to say this. I said I wouldn't, but I'm going to because
go.
People need to know this. Okay. I have probably 25 photos that were taken from negatives taken of Mars. They've mapped Mars completely.
Mm-hmm.
And so I and some friends have been looking at some of these squares, these big images of Mars, bit by bit, blowing them up as large as you can blow them up. It's as good a picture as any of the stuff they take here on Earth. Maybe not as good, but very close. And I have right now 26 pictures of items that we've seen on the ground that are definitely alien. Or let's put it this way, not Earth made. I mean,
Are those in your book too?
no, I've just gotten those. Those are like recent.
Oh my God. What?
Yeah. So
How
I'll probably
can
put them in my
we
next.
see them? Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
put
Please, can you come up with your next book right away? Please. What? So, can you share what you saw? What it is that it's in these pictures?
Anybody can go look at them. It's like if you're curious about something, you
Yes.
research, right?
Well,
I mean, some people, it's like remote viewing. I teach remote viewing, and it's kind of like over 7 days, they do, everybody does a miracle in the room, probably more than one time, more than 5 times. They actually perform miracles themselves in a room. And at the end, they say, but when it's like, when do I get the magic pill that makes me perfect? No, everybody said, well, Joe's a natural. He never had to do anything for it. He just like is naturally psychic. No, I'm not. I had to break my butt too. I had to practice for 3 years to get any good. The difference is I got paid to do it. I did it 24/7, 7
it's a
days
good
a week.
motivator.
Yeah.
It's a good motivator.
So, but most people can't do that kind of practice. It's not reasonable because they have to work for a living. They got to put food on the table. I
Yeah, of course.
understand that. So I try to teach them how. In the beginning, we have what we call a gestalt. You can use a gestalt if it's done properly. You can use a gestalt to give you answers for just about anything you want to know. And that doesn't take but a week of training. So it's silly to demand. It's kind of, if I took somebody out and taught them how to bowl, in a bowling alley, and we spent an entire Saturday throwing the bowling ball, and they loved it. They had a great time doing it. Not a single one of them would have an expectation to bowl 3 perfect games in a row
Sure.
that day or within the next 2 years. I mean, there's probably a handful of people that can do that at all, but nobody gets pissed off about it. But if you teach somebody to remote view and they can't remote view perfectly after a week, they get pissed. Why is that?
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. We want things in a hurry.
Well, it's that, but it's something else. They don't understand what it was actually designed to do, what it's used for. It's not used to draw a perfect picture of a room or an object. It's designed to give you an answer to an immediate problem that may be life and death. May hinge on that answer. Okay. And what gets you to that is the design of the protocol, which everybody's totally blind. So it's the intention of the event. It's the attention to detail in the protocol and the expectation for the result. If all that works perfectly, you get a little tidbit of information that tells you the missing piece to answering the whole problem. Now, what's cool about it is you can look at that and never see it. But when it goes to the analyst that asks the question, he has piles of stuff on his desk, reams of stuff. He knows the problem inside out, upside down, and backwards. He will look at it and go, wow, there's my answer right there. Isn't that cool?
That is that's indicative to me of a system in place for people to collaborate so that they can figure things out.
Yes. It means the analyst is important. The remote viewer is important.
Yeah.
The monitor in the room is important. The tasker is important. One is just as important as the other. And they all have to be on the same sheet of music and understand why they're doing it.
Not so hard.
Not hard, but nobody believes it. Nobody wants to learn that. They all want to be the remote viewers who knows the answer to everything, could draw the whole inside of the UFO. And I don't know anybody on the planet that can do that. Not even me.
We're not even not if it's not even you, then we're all a lost cause. What so last second last question. What is all what does this all mean for you? So when you're finally transitioning, when you're finally leaving this planet, what have you made a decision on what decision you're going to make once your body dies?
Oh yeah. I know there's more. I absolutely dying is not dying as we understand it. Dying is simply changing the clothes you're wearing. You're going to a different job, that's all, or going to a different experience. It's the experience you're getting ready to go to that you've either earned a right to it or you haven't.
Hmm.
The problem is in your life, you garner experience in your life. And the fact is, when you die, it's the one thing you can take with you is your memory of that experience, that collection of experiences. You actually take it with you. You know, you've heard of people saying, then I reviewed my entire life in like seconds. Well, you do. You actually do. But here's the issue. When you review everything that you did in your life, you don't get to feel again what you felt in the experience. You get to feel what everybody else that was part of that felt and got from it. So if most of it was negative, you blew it.
Hmm.
You have to now live with that. And in my mind, that's hell. Because now you know precisely how many people you hurt, how many people you trashed, how many people you did not do service for. You understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah. And so, but if you spend your entire life trying to do the right thing, moral and ethically, you have a morality and an ethical set of rules. No matter how hard you try, you're never going to get it perfect. But you know that by the feedback you get in all the people who have experienced what your actions were when you did them. And if it's predominantly constructive and positive, that's heaven. That's
Hmm.
knowing that all of that you did, you earned. And guess what? You also find out you're not only you're all the people you interacted with as well.
Yeah. Ah.
Okay. And so you have this full identity, understanding, and experience of all the people that you interacted with. So if you want to move on in a different set of clothing, that's the preferred way, not the other way, because it's going to be hell on earth, hell somewhere. And
maybe then it is superfluous to ask you this last question, but whatever. What the hell?
okay,
What does greatness mean for you then?
greatness, the ability to see every human being as different, and have a respect for every human being for who and what they are. And even if you dislike them, there's something mirrored by them in you.
Hmm.
And I think that's deliberate. Okay. That happens in a deliberate way so that we learn from that experience. That's true growth. That's what gives us a better set of clothing when we move on. That understanding, that grokking it. But if we don't operate in that venue, then we're doomed to keep doing it over and over and over. That's just my view of it.
This has been just an utter pleasure spending the time with you. This has been really, really cool, Joe. Really cool. I like it. I don't even know. I don't even know how to say really cool better. What I just said. It. Thank you for number one, all the patience you had with the technical difficulties that we've
Oh yeah,
presented to you
not
over
a
the
problem.
last. But I mean, for sharing your experiences with the world. For us, it doesn't even matter whether people believe some of the stuff that you've been through, that you've experienced. It's the fact that you're open to sharing them, and you don't have to. So,
I
thank you for
don't
that.
mind. I don't mind. I mean, I'm still wondering about some of them, why I had to go through it. But it is what it is. You just do the best you can. Um, I met some great people in the world, some really beautiful people. I told you about the young girl that I taught hygiene to from the village, right?
No, I sense a part four here.
No, I'll leave you with this one little story. It won't take long. I lived in a village called Nungai. It's way up in the jungles of Thailand. It's right on the Mekong River, across the river, almost directly from Vientiane, Laos, and very close to the headquarters for a very large intelligence agency I can't mention.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
And I was working there for 14 months. And I had a partner. We always worked in pairs, and my partner was very physical. So he put in a hand-driven well with a sledgehammer that prevented them from having to walk all the way the half mile or whatever it was to the river to get water. They could just
Mm-hmm.
pump it right there in the center of the village. He got all the equipment through Sears and Roebuck, through the catalog. And
Yeah.
like Christmas, we made a Christmas tree out of coat hangers and put blinking lights all over it. And the whole village would come at night and sit in a half moon and watch it blink. And they want to know what it was for. And we told them the whole story of uh, baby Jesus and all that stuff. They came to us in the middle of the year and they said, "We'd like to borrow your coat hanger tree with the lights." And we said, "Why?" And they said, "Because Buddha's birthday is coming up."
Amazing.
So I
Amazing.
think some anthropologist is probably going crazy by now. But anyway, my thing was the kids. The kids didn't even know enough to keep their hands washed when they ate. And so I ordered bars of soap that would float in the river so they couldn't claim they lost them, and
Nice.
taught them how to bathe properly, got toothbrushes and toothpaste for them, and, just taught them good personal hygiene. And these are little kids, and I loved all of them. And then I had to leave, and I left, and I really missed them. But that was in That was in 1972. I think it was 72 now. It's hard for me to remember now, but um, so 1998, I had heart attacks and open heart surgery in 1985, right after I retired. 1998, I had no heart problems from then.
It's crazy.
And that was from the
Mhm.
stress.
Of
I had no
course.
heart problems from then.
Of what? Stress of what? Like it's like
The remote
from
viewing.
the.
Yeah.
Oh, only that? Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, my wife says, "Oh, you got a divorce, you lost your job, you got a new job, you moved. There's like 7 things you should never do all at the
Yeah.
same time. Did them all
Oh yeah. Of
in
course. After
like
15 years of war. Yeah, sure.
yeah, in 90 days. So I had 5 heart attacks and open heart surgery. Anyway, I uh, I recovered. I haven't had a heart problem since, by the way. But in 98, they found out that the mammary arteries don't reocclude. So my heart surgeon came to me, Dr. Cronin. He said, I'd like to go back in and replace your bypasses with the mammary arteries because they never reocclude. We don't know why, but they just don't. Would you be up for that? I said, sure, whatever. So I went into the hospital and they cracked my chest a second time. And when he got in there, he said, your heart looked like this giant softball with ropes all over it because the capillaries had been blown up to like 5 times their normal size because I had done so much work. It just healed the heart. So he said I didn't have to do it, and you're going to outlive everybody in the hospital. So he said I just closed you back up. So I'm one night in the ICU unit. At 2 in the morning, I'm reading a book because I couldn't sleep. And the new shift of nurses came in, and one of the nurses was Thai. And as she walked by in the very low light of, you
Hate to
know,
say it.
early morning, I said, Sawadee. I greeted her formally, and she said, how did you know I was Thai? Everybody thinks I'm Chinese or something. And I said, well, I lived in a little village in Thailand a long time ago. I said, where are you from in Thailand? She said, you wouldn't know. I too came from a little tiny village. And she says, I said, what was its name and where was it? She said, the name was Nung Kai. And I said, that's the village I lived in. And she looked at me. Now the lights are turned really low at night. And she went, oh my God, you're the gray ghost. That's what they called me, the kids, because
Wow.
my skin was pale. So they called me the gray ghost. That was my nickname. I didn't know that. And I asked her, how did you get here as an ICU nurse? How'd that happen? She said both her parents were killed by bandits. So she was put in a Catholic orphanage in Thailand. She was taught to be a nurse's aide so she'd have a job when she turned 18. She went to Bangkok, got her RN at the hospital in Bangkok. She was hired by Triple Army Hospital out of Hawaii and got some of her certificates there. Was hired by Walter Reed in Washington, D.C. from Triple Army Hospital. Became a U.S. citizen and then was hired out of Walter Reed by the University of Virginia Hospital because she had ICU credentials. So her first night in the ICU, my one and only night in the ICU, she's standing there talking to me.
Wow.
Yeah. That, and I just wanted to tell you that story because who would have ever thought that that would ever happen? I've had that happen 3 times in my life with people I met in some far flung place that I just spent time with them, just spent time with them. I didn't have to, but I did. and one of them was a guy. I held it. He was coming into it wasn't where the ambassador is. It was like a consulate. He was coming in there to get uh, an authorization to visit America, and he was asking somebody, but his English was really bad. And I called him over and I said, "Are you looking for I can't remember what they call the pass now, but I said, it's right in here." And I held the door open. I said, "It's right in there, right that desk. Just go in there and tell them you want one." And he said, "Thank you." And he kept bowing to me and I kept bowing back. And he finally went in and I guess he got his pass. I left. Well, I'm in Washington, D.C., and I'm visiting the Polish embassy. And I walk up to the front door and this guy is going in the door at the same time I am. And he pulls the door for me. And as I go in, he does this. He touches my arm and I turn around. I said, "Yes." He said, "You did the same thing for me in wherever it was now. I can't remember." Same guy. He's a U.S. citizen now, but he's going in a Polish embassy for some reason.
Wow.
Polish embassy. He's not even Polish.
Yeah, of all places. Of all places.
Yeah. So, I mean, bizarre. But just being kind.
This is the work of the gray ghost.
Yeah, there you go. Work of the gray ghost. We'll end on
that. I like it. Yeah, I like it. That's good. And now we know what the title of this podcast is going to be.
There you
go. Joe, let's this is good. Like this is a lot to absorb in this 3-part series. If you're open to it, we want this to settle in with our listeners and get some feedback. I would love to stay in touch with you because this has been
sure that's
truly great.
You know where I live.
I do, and I fear that you know where I live.
And I know where you live.
Yes.
We'll talk again in a few months.
We will. We will, Joe. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.